Okay, so the last few shiurim, we were discussing the relationship between Rebbe and Talmud. And this came about because Rav Matal was speaking about the important practice of having a guide, madrich, in Avodas Hashem, and serving God. And even great masters themselves, they took upon themselves having a master who would guide them in the emphasis of practice. And we pointed out to them areas of service. So this is where we're coming off of. So then we discussed a number of shiurim, the whole nature of the relationship between a Rebbe and a Talmud, and how that is a very necessary relationship and crucial for Avodas Hashem. So now we're going to take off from there and continue where Rav Matal was discussing. This is at the very top of the page. There's V'al zeh mispale u'mismarmer ha-mesilas yesharim. So concerning this, the Mesilas Yesharim was very, very, very disturbed. How is it possible for people to abandon this deep wisdom? Why should the whole area of the service of God be the inheritance of small-minded people, less intelligent people? They don't have the intelligence or the guidance for it. At the beginning of the Sefer, the Ramchal points out that of all different areas of wisdom in the Torah or outside of the Torah, this area receives very little attention. So that even in Torah, people will study, but when it comes to learning about the whole wisdom of service of God, people don't invest time and their thought into it. And so it just remains at the immature level of how anyone understands these things. So like, in Parashas Eikev we just had last week, it says, what does Hashem God ask of you? But to fear him and to walk in his ways and to love him. Right? So all of these things, which are whole great studios, very great topics of exploring what are these things and what's the nature of it, are just left really untouched. And so people occupy themselves in different types of study. And sometimes very theoretical study, which is not even so relevant, but abandon these things which are so necessary for living as a Jew. So it bothers him greatly. And so what happens, he just says, that there's a certain attraction to it by people that have an inclination toward the spiritual, but are often not guided, not developed, sometimes not intelligent. And so the whole thinking of people is, well, that's what you do, is you say lots of psalms, or you do lots of different practices, but the great wisdom that's in it is unknown. It's unexplored. It's like you never bother to really invest time to understand what is this. So that is what Rav Matal is referring to, what he writes there in the beginning. Because people don't have even the capacity, the vessel for the depth of this wisdom. In other words, it's talking about people that they're not trained in any way to be able to understand the depth of this wisdom. So the outcome of this is that people's service becomes something very external without any sort of tam. Tam means like, what it means, a taste. It means there's no sense of like, there's something rich over here. So you could have people that are very intelligent, even very learned, but when it comes to the areas of Avodas Hashem, let's say like davening or working on oneself or learning all about all of these types of areas of Torah, of to love Hashem, fear Hashem, it's very, very cold. It's very distant. Davening is done very fast, with little engagement. The mitzvahs are performed very perfunctory. There's no or very little time given to study of these areas. And so there's a very great divide between often a person's knowledge and their practice. And this is all, what happens is it creates it creates an unnatural divisiveness within the person. So when you emphasize only one area and you de-emphasize or ignore a whole area, so you have very great imbalance. So that therefore it could look like you have either very intelligent people and very invested people in Torah, but how does their relationship to Hashem look? How do the mitzvahs look? Very cold, very dry. Or you can have people that are really not unintelligent, and they're the ones involved with this, but they don't have any understanding of the depth, the richness of this whole area. So the whole thing is very, very, very off. That's what the Mesil Shem is struggling with, and is very disturbed by in his introduction to the Sefer. And what he's seeking to do in his Sefer is to give it the proper position. What is this whole area of Avodas Hashem? What is it really about? Let's explore it. Let's learn it. It's not simple like you think it is. It's actually very deep in study and even great in its practice. And so the whole Sefer is really it's like virgin territory, like never ground, like never been mined like it is in that Sefer, where you have ideas and words known to people but unexplored. And he begins to break it down into its details, into its concepts, and what is it, and how to acquire it, and how to maintain it, not to lose it, and various types that are included in each one. And this whole beautiful picture of the service of God is presented to the person. When you read the Sefer itself, you get such a feeling of richness and attraction to the whole service, because it opens it up. It's like, if you come to davening, right, and all you have is the words, it's like you have no approach how to get inside unless you have a relationship with Hashem. So look at a person that has his greatest slavos in davening. It's like, wow, what is that about? Because the person has a relationship with Hashem. Right? It doesn't come from nothing. How's that relationship come about? The relationship comes about because the person's engaging their mind, they're engaging their emotions in this. And therefore, when they come to davening, they have a whole approach. It isn't about repeating the same words again and again and again. It's about speaking out their heart to Hashem. It's about deep feelings. It's about contemplation. So the whole area, which is like, there's like a barrier, is opened up. And now it's like it becomes a whole engaging service. That whole difference in engagement has to do with putting your mind, your thoughts, your ideas on something. And then from there, letting it to reach the person, the human experience. So he says, but the true chasidus that's desirable is very far from our understanding. You don't know what does it look like. So a person can view someone, right, and the person is very engaged. They're very excited. They're doing his bodhidus. They're davening with a lot of energy. And you look at that, you're from the outside, like, well, what's that about? What's going on over there? Oh, that guy must be very religious. Right? You don't even have a concept of what this person is into, because all you have is just, you have whatever you know about Torah. And let's say it's a lot, but it's in a whole different area. You have a great knowledge of something, and you're looking at the behavior, the external actions of a person, but you don't know what's going on. What's it all about? I remember there's two stories. One, I remember that I was living somewhere far, not in the Jewish community, and we were davening Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, a person feels very emotional about, the service, and I must have caught the attention of someone. So this person comes over to me and asks me afterwards, "Is something wrong?" Of course, nothing's wrong. It's Rosh Hashanah, right? Or the story with Rabbi Eliezer Silver I mentioned. Eliezer Silver was one of the great American Rabbanim in post-Holocaust. And he was a Rav in Cincinnati and maybe another place before that. And one day, one of the Balabatim, people in the shul, approached him and said, "Rabbi, we noticed that the light was on in your study very late." He said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I was studying." He said, "But I thought you already achieved your degree." Right? Those are two examples of the person has no concept of what's going on. Like, you have no concept that tefillah is, there's an involvement, of your feelings, and Torah is an ongoing study of learning. But when you're looking from the outside, you don't have these concepts. You have no idea what this is. But what should be going on in Avodas Hashem is a whole inner world. It's a whole inner world of ideas, of thoughts to be explored, to be understood. And then there's a whole inner world of practice that person needs to struggle with, to wrestle with. How do you actually acquire a midah? How do you hold on to it? How do you keep it from losing it? So that's a whole world that if you've never studied it, you are very external to the whole thing. And the truly desired service, which is called the highest level, called chasidus, we don't have an idea what it is. Shemisha achein oseg ba, because indeed the people involved with it, ein lo hakilim lahasiga. They don't have the vessels. They don't have the intelligence or the development to really understand it. V'lamod al godel amkusa, and to really get the great depth that's there. Amkus hanefesh. It's a soul depth. Amkus hachachma. It's a wisdom depth. Hatamun v'haganuzba, that is concealed within it. V'lachein motzi kruz, and therefore we make a proclamation. Hamachayev is Bali HaChachma, that obligate people of wisdom, la'ayin ba'amkusa, to look into its depth, ulekabel mora derech, and to accept a Rebbe, a teacher, lahadricha uliyasho b'derech hayunba, to guide the person and to straighten them out in its learning. Certainly, there are infinite levels in the deepening of the service. Omek, depth within depth. So a person really gets into it, begin to study this whole area, it will reveal greater and greater depth of what does the service of God mean. And in particular, acquiring these qualities. Afal Pike, nevertheless, the Gemara says HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't come with tainos, doesn't come with claims against the person. In other words, HaKadosh Baruch Hu seeks what we're capable of doing. In other words, even though there are so many levels that are available, and we're obligated to explore them and to achieve them, on the other hand, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not coming with expectations that are beyond us. There's an understanding that wherever the person is, that's the expectation, and the expectation is within, our level of our generation. Each person, their background, where they're coming from, their ability in their own time, what they're able to do, and their own capacity. So it's not that, there's so much there, and therefore the expectation is you have to get it, and therefore HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to be upset with you for not reaching it. The expectation is within our capacity. We cannot abandon this pressing matter. That you cannot be a servant of God without it. It's impossible to achieve the goal of our coming into the world without delving into it. So we will really have missed the tachlis, achieving our goal, if we just ignore this whole area of Torah. And say, it's sufficient for me to just look at this area, and I'll do a little bit of this, and then I'll leave this. This is not really something I'm getting into. Certainly a person has to deepen their learning in it with their heart and their mind, both. Their intelligence, their thinking, their understanding, and then their involvement. We call the avodah shebalev, the heart service of it. And then to work and to elevate from level to level. Okay, we have to move along. Right? This madrega, this level was acceptable now. Now that this developed, I expect more from myself. And this is the level I have to be at. And that could be in many areas, but but the expectation for constant elevation, constant movement, and a person can't just grade themselves based upon the community's level is this, so that's what I'll do, and that's sort of okay. I'll okay that, or this is where I'm at, and then you're sort of just hanging out in that area. No, what's the next level? What's the next place? That's a question that often people don't ask. Like in a career, people always ask that question. Like, where do I go next? How do I achieve the next level of position, of wealth, of power? How do you move up? Same thing in Avodas Hashem. How do you advance? What's the right level? According to the level of wisdom of that generation and each person, we have to move to the next madriga, the next level. Okay. Tsuras ha'hadracha v'ha'kabbalah nechona. So this is, next piece is titled, and how guidance, the proper guidance. Hine, b'derech b'nei adam hamaschilim likanes b'sharei avoda. Now, the way of people that are first entering into the gates of service. Ubefrat bachurim tzeirim. Certainly, this is true when you have young bachurim. This talk is given to the audience of younger bachurim, younger boys, teenage. Sherotzim lahaschil lalos hasulam avoda. So you're speaking about a person that has an idea of the whole ability to really climb spiritually, and you want that. Okay, but you're not really sure how to go about it. But you have received the inspiration. You have read enough to realize that Judaism is not simply a set of beliefs and repetitive practices, but this is about real movement and real spiritual elevation, and enlarging and expanding the person's ideas, their service. So you have that picture in your mind. You've read enough stories, you've seen enough that this is your image. You want that. But b'derech klal, ein lahem adayin havchana al eze inyan lahadav avoda. People that are beginning don't have the power of distinction to know where to emphasize service. Where do you put your time? How do you dedicate your energies towards things? Because you haven't really come upon the understanding of the depth of service. It's very common that people make a lot of mistakes. Here's an example. It could be that a person begins to turn their attention to something that's rather subordinate. It's not an essential thing in service. And they dedicate too much time to it. So let's say they go for a detail, and they spend their time emphasizing or overemphasizing a detail. Not that the detail is unimportant, but the time allotted to it and how you see it in the scheme of things is imbalanced. I'll give you an example, just in terms of, let's say, like learning. Like in learning, like the Gemara says that a person has to dedicate time to different areas of Torah, because different areas of Torah give the person understanding of the entirety of Torah. So it could be, for example, that a person dedicates their energies only in one area, let's say. And let's say it's not even, let's say it's an area, let's say like reading, let's say like Torah anthology. Just read a lot of Torah anthology. So it's nice. It's not a bad thing. I mean, it's better than, hanging out in the streets. But if you really want to know how to advance in learning, so you have to have some sort of guidance. You can't just read the Torah anthology. It's not going to provide you with what the person needs. So you have to be learning, person has to learn halacha, because he has to know what to do. And you have to learn Musar and Yiras Hashem, because you have to know the concepts and the feelings of a Jew. And you have to learn Tanakh, to be able to hear the words of the Nevi'im. What do the Nevi'im say? All these foundational points of faith come from their words. So a person has to have a general exposure to different areas of learning and the different styles that each one brings and a different knowledge. And then one has a sort of a wholeness in learning. Whereas a person can just say, dedicate, well, I just do this. I learn Torah and theology, or I just learn halacha, right? And then, because you don't have proper guidance, you've dedicating your energies in a way that's off. The same thing can happen in service. A person can be sort of they read a story about someone, or they see something and they're sort of taken in by emphasizing something in their service of Hashem. And it's not the essence. It's not the main thing. So that often happens when a person begins the service of Hashem. So it's like you're walking into an area that really has a lot of wisdom, but you don't have any order to it. There's no organization, no guidance. So you're just grabbing at this, grabbing at that. This sounds interesting. This looks appealing. This subject interests me. And it's just like a very wild smorgasbord of the person just grabbing different things. Now what happens is that person gets inspired to do something that sort of catches their fascination, and then sort of they get into it and then sort of peters out. So you get really into something, you put all your energy into it, and then it's not balanced properly. And then after a while, it's like, okay, you lose your inspiration for it. So that often happens when you have an imbalanced approach to the service. And then after a short time, desire completely goes away. Because that was everything. And then once you lose your flavor in that, so then you don't have anything. All that comes from a lack of guidance. Person decided they're going to get into something that's doesn't really pertain to them so much. Something that matters to them. Therefore, one must know in all matters of service, one has to weigh, to look carefully. Is this for me? Is this what I should be doing? Where should I put my energy? Where should I dedicate my time? How do I apportion my learning properly? How can I spend my day and give my energies to where I should be doing it? I have many examples. A person could think, well, Hashem blessed me with wealth, right? So if a person will say, I'm going to support for tzedakah. Okay, that's good. That's a good understanding of using what Hashem gave you. But you also have an obligation for your own, an obligation to grow. But since you said, well, I'm going to give the tzedakah, I'm going to support everyone. And so then you exonerate yourself from study. That becomes your thing. I recently read this story. I think it's of Chaim Kanievsky, very wealthy person. Came to him and wanted to write him a check, and he said, was Rav Steinman, he said, what about your own learning? I was like, no, I'm gonna write a check, I'm gonna support. He said, no. You have an obligation to learn. And he wouldn't take the money. And this person didn't have an understanding of like, what do you mean? I'm the one that supports everyone. I take care of you. Right? No, you have an obligation to learn. You don't exonerate it by supporting other people. That's my thing. My thing. This is my thing. Or says, davening is my thing. I really connect with davening. Good. That's beautiful. What about learning? You also have to learn. That's the main growth of a Jew is to learn, right? Or conversely, So often a person's inclined to those things that they like, or maybe they're good at, or they're attracted to. But Avodas Hashem is a very large area. That includes practice, all different things. And therefore, things have to be balanced and they have to be approached in a way that is mature. V'chein. Next paragraph. Pogesh eze inyan ba'avoda. Person learns something about service. Be'eze sefer. He reads about it in some book. Or he hears about it. So then he begins to really work at it. Okay, now we're talking about someone that really is serious. They really want to achieve something. So they put all their energies about it. Sarach Leda, one must know. Certainly a person has to be inspired by, they have to not be cold, they have to feel. When they read something, to be inspired by it. It reaches you. Certainly, a person has to stop and think. This makes sense for me. So it's very good to be inspired by a speaker, by something you read in a sefer. It really reaches you. But before you throw all your energies into it, you have to know, 1 second, is that what I need to be doing? There's a teaching we mentioned some time ago from the Nesiva Shalom, very sharp teaching. He says, what's Avodah Zarah? Idolatry? Avodah Zarah? It literally means a strange service. Zar is a stranger. He says, Avodah Shazar Lacha. Any service that's strange to you, that's Avodah Zarah. If you're doing a service that's not for you, it's strange to you, you're doing Avodah Zarah. That means you're engaged in a service that's not the service you're supposed to be engaged in. And that doesn't mean that you're actual halachic avodah zarah. He was trying to say that's an avodah. That's not your avodah. It's not the avodah you should be doing. So every person has to know, what's my avodah? What's my service? What's my service in general? What's my service now? What am I being called to do?
How do you understand strange when what's used there? It's strange to you. How to understand that?
Meaning it's a stranger. This is not the service that should be familiar to you right now. When you're putting your efforts into some sort of service that is not where you should be putting it, that's a strange type of service. That's not the service. Foreign, outside. More clear?
So, is he saying that if it's something that doesn't appeal to you, it doesn't strike a note for you, then that's the strange service, and therefore you be the judge?
No. What he means, if this is not a service that's really appropriate for you, then you are engaged in a foreign service. Yeah, for example, let's say take like a bacher in the yeshiva. So his main job, his learning right now. Let's say he gets involved in all the administrative things in the yeshiva. That's not your thing. That's not your service now. You're supposed to be learning. That's what he means, like in avodah zarah.
Oh, okay.
Or you read something that's a very pietistic practice. And it's a very beautiful thing. But that's not where you're at. That's not your level it's not your true level. It's not where you should be really be exacting on yourself. that getting involved in that's like an avodah zarah. It's a strange sort of service. So this thing has got to match where you're at and proportionate to sort of the time you're giving. This often happens when you have young people. Thank God, the beauty of inspiration. They're not sterile and cold to things, but they're not mature enough to know where they're at, what to do. And then sometimes a person could be very too exacting on themselves because there's expectations that are not really where they're at. And then they could be overly harsh. And then that's really off because that's not an expectation right now. So you have to, when reading or when learning or when hearing, one has to think after that. Okay, it's beautiful, I'm inspired by it, that. Now what should I be doing? What's my service right now? Very often, the essence of the teaching you learn depends on who it's being said to, and what the situation around it was. So you can take things out of context, then you don't really have an understanding of what it is. Who is it being addressed to? Doesn't mean that you should be doing that right now. You should basically have to even sometimes be exacting into the authenticity of the statement. Maybe it was somehow corrupted over time, even unintentionally, but it's not accurate. Sometimes statements are not precise. You can't really learn from it exactly. By a slight change in what it is, you can completely change the implication of it. Nevertheless, the obligation of guidance is an essential condition. All who want to enter into the gates. Certainly to young people, or those people that get easily inspired by what they see and what they hear, and sort of latch on to that. And then they do according to their own intelligence, their own understanding. They heard this, they saw this. Without distinguishing in that matter, does that pertain to me? That path is certainly not going to be successful. It's not going to hold. Because the person is not distinguishing really what pertains to them truthfully. They're doing things that they heard or they saw by copying other things. That's a monkey. That's like being like a monkey. Just copying. So here we have just an entryway to Avodas Hashem, the importance of beginning to really think in a personal way. Okay, where am I at? Where should I be dedicating my energy? And it also includes how much time I can dedicate to Torah. Maybe I should enlarge my investment in learning. Maybe I should dedicate time here, more time to study. Do I need to be doing all the leisure